The funeral was a small, somber affair. Just a handful of us gathered to say goodbye to my father, Ted Walton. As I stood there, numb with grief, my mother-in-law, Denise, leaned in close. "Gina, life doesn't wait. You have to start thinking about us now," she said coldly. I fought back tears, my heart aching. Am I not allowed to grieve my father quietly? He was the one person who truly understood me, and now he was gone. After the service, the lawyer approached. "Mrs. Davis, your father left you his house in Brooklyn Heights. It's a quaint but valuable property." My husband Mike's eyes lit up. "Wow, that's incredible. We could renovate it, make it perfect for my parents and us to live together." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "But I need time. This is all so sudden." Mike squeezed my arm. "Of course, dear. We'll discuss it later." As we drove home, Mike couldn't contain his excitement. Just imagine it. A big, beautiful home for all of us. No more dealing with landlords or mortgages. I stared out the window, my mind swirling. Dad's house was my last connection to him. How could I let it go so easily? In the following weeks, the pressure only intensified. Denise and Frank, my father-in-law, seemed to take every opportunity to criticize me. "Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs. You must do better for him," Denise snapped one night as I served dinner. Frank eyed the meal dismissively. "A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal." I bit my tongue, feeling their disapproval like a weight on my shoulders. Mike just shrugged, siding with his parents as usual. Then one afternoon, I came home to a jarring sight: construction vehicles outside Dad's house. A contractor approached me confused. "Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders." My heart dropped. Renovations? I never agreed to any of this. I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually. "It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home." Tears stung my eyes. "Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me?" His face hardened. "If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through. It's that simple." I felt like the ground was crumbling beneath me. After everything Dad had given me, was I really going to let his memory be tarnished like this? Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze. "I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you." As I walked out that day, I knew my life would never be the same. But in that moment, all I could feel was a fierce determination to honor the man who had given me so much strength. After walking out on Mike that day, I felt adrift. My marriage was crumbling, and I had nowhere to go. Thankfully, an old friend of my father's, Paul Hendricks, offered me a lifeline. "Gina, you're welcome to stay with me until you get back on your feet," Paul said warmly, ushering me into his modest apartment. As I settled in, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. He had been Dad's confidant for years, and now I desperately needed that wisdom. "Paul, what am I going to do?" I asked, feeling the weight of my situation. "Mike has turned Dad's house into a battleground." Paul placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "That house is yours, Gina. No one can take that away from you. We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, Paul and I pored over documents and legal papers, formulating a plan. My determination grew as the path ahead became clearer. "Your father wanted that house to be a sanctuary, a place of peace," Paul reminded me. "We'll make sure it serves that purpose in his memory." Finally, I was ready to confront Mike and his parents. Paul had secured a meeting at the house, saying it was time for an open discussion about its future. The tension was palpable as Denise, Frank, and Mike arrived. Mike shot me a resentful glare, but I stood my ground, Paul by my side. "You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance," I stated firmly. "This house is part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that." Denise's face contorted in rage. "You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes. Well, it ends now." To my surprise, Mike spoke up, his voice dripping with disdain. "So you're just going to throw us out? Your own family?" "If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "This is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you." Paul stepped forward. "I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave." Denise opened her mouth to protest, but Frank silenced her with a defeated shake of his head. As they turned to leave, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. It was over. I had won. In the weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit. "He would be so proud of you, Gina," Paul said as we stood in the newly revived garden. "You've turned this place into something truly special." I smiled, feeling the warm breeze on my face. I just hope I've honored his memory and shown the strength he instilled in me. As the grand opening day arrived for the new community center, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the serenity he had always provided. It was the first day of my new life, a life of freedom and peace, just as he would have wanted. In the weeks following my confrontation with Mike and his parents, daily life became increasingly tense. Denise and Frank seemed determined to make me miserable, criticizing my every move. "Gina, Mike needs more than just chicken thighs for dinner," Denise snapped one evening as I served our modest meal. "You must do better for him." I bit my tongue, refusing to engage. But Frank piled on with a dismissive glance at the food. "A cheap steak? After his hard day at work, Mike deserves a proper meal." Mike remained silent as usual, siding with his parents through his passivity. I felt utterly alone, isolated in my own home. The constant barrage of demands and insults wore me down. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for Denise and Frank. They seemed hell-bent on dominating every aspect of our lives. One evening, as I cleared the dinner plates, Denise fixed me with a cold stare. "You know, Gina, we're not getting any younger. We'll need to start discussing living arrangements soon." My heart sank. I knew exactly what she was implying, moving into my father's house in Brooklyn Heights. I need more time," I stammered, feeling trapped. "That house means so much to me. It was Dad's." Frank scoffed. "Ted's gone now. It's time to start thinking practically about our future as a family." Mike finally spoke up, his voice laced with irritation. "They're right, Gina. We can't keep putting this off. My parents need a permanent place to live, and that house is the perfect solution." I wanted to scream. How could he be so callous about my father's memory? But I knew any protest would be met with more criticism, more demands. In the following days, the tension only escalated. Denise and Frank seemed to take every opportunity to remind me of my supposed failings as a wife and daughter-in-law. "Did you even dust today, Gina?" Denise would sneer, running a finger along a surface. "This place is a pigsty." Frank would chime in with his own jabs. "No wonder Mike comes home so stressed. This environment is unbearable." Through it all, Mike remained infuriatingly passive, letting his parents dictate the narrative of our lives. I felt like I was slowly suffocating, drowning in their constant belittlement. Finally, one fateful afternoon, I returned home to a shocking sight: construction vehicles outside my father's house. A contractor approached me, confused. "Mrs. Davis, your husband approved these renovations. We're just following orders." My heart dropped to my stomach. "Renovations? I never agreed to any of this." I stormed inside, confronting Mike. He tried to play it off casually, but I could see the smug satisfaction in his eyes. "It's for the best, Gina. We're making this place our dream home, just like we discussed." Tears stung my eyes as I realized the profound breach of trust. "Our dream home? This was my father's house, Mike. How could you do this without even consulting me?" His face hardened, and I saw a glimpse of the true man he had become. Selfish, entitled, devoid of empathy. "If you can't accept my parents living with us, then we're through," he stated coldly. "It's that simple." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. My marriage was a sham, my autonomy stripped away piece by piece. But I wouldn't be a victim anymore. Clenching my fists, I met Mike's gaze with a newfound strength. "I won't be manipulated anymore. This house is about my father's legacy, and I'm going to protect it, with or without you." As I walked out that day, I knew there was no turning back. But for the first time in years, I felt free, ready to reclaim the life my father had wanted for me. After I stormed out of my father's home in a fit of anger, I found myself wandering aimlessly through the city streets. The crisp night air provided little solace as I grappled with the profound betrayal I had endured. Mike's callous disregard for my feelings had cut me deeply. Eventually, I made my way to Paul's apartment. the one place I felt I could find refuge. As I stepped inside, a wave of calm washed over me, a momentary escape from the turmoil raging within. I sank into the familiar comfort of his worn armchair, allowing the anger and hurt to slowly subside. In that moment of quiet, I found myself haunted by the sickening realization that my husband had so brazenly violated my trust. How could he have authorized such drastic changes to Dad's cherished home without my consent? The sting of that betrayal burned fiercely, fueling my indignation. As the hours ticked by, I pictured Mike's smug satisfaction as he oversaw the destruction of that sacred space, the desecration of Dad's memory. My fury mounted as I imagined his callous disregard for my feelings, his selfish disrespect for all that Dad had left me. The man had no shame, no regard for the sanctity of that connection to my father. In that moment, I resolved to sever that final tie to him, to cut that last cord binding me to his contempt. I would not allow his arrogance to further defile Dad's legacy, to strip me of that precious link to the man who had given me so much. I would reclaim my dignity, my self-respect, by severing that final thread. With a renewed sense of purpose, I rose from the chair, determined to preserve that last remnant of my father's spirit. I would not permit Mike's callous disregard to taint that final bond, that last connection to the man who had nurtured me, who had shaped my character. I would not allow his scorn to further diminish my sense of self. With a steadying breath, I made my way to the small alcove where I kept my few cherished possessions from Dad. There, nestled in a worn leather case, was the small token of his affection, the simple memento of his love, the antique fountain pen he had given me on my 16th birthday. I grasped the smooth, polished surface, feeling the familiar curve of the nib against my fingertips, and began to chronicle my resolve, my determination to preserve that final connection to the man who had meant so much. In the days following my confrontation with Mike, I found myself adrift, untethered from the life I had once known. The decision to leave my husband had been agonizing, but I knew in my heart it was the only path forward. I could no longer subject myself to his manipulation, his blatant disregard for my autonomy. As I settled into the modest apartment Paul had offered me, I felt a strange sense of calm amidst the turmoil. This space, though unfamiliar, represented a clean slate, a chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, free from the toxic influence of Mike and his overbearing parents. Yet, even as I sought to move forward, the sting of Mike's betrayal lingered. The image of my father's house, that sacred space now defiled by his selfish renovations, haunted me. How could he have so callously disregarded my wishes, my connection to Dad's memory? In those quiet moments alone, I found myself wrestling with a burning sense of injustice. Mike had not only violated my trust, but had trampled upon the very essence of what Dad had left me, a sanctuary, a place of serenity and refuge. His actions had desecrated that final link to the man who had shaped me, who had instilled in me the values of integrity and respect. As the days turned to weeks, that simmering indignation began to crystallize into a fierce determination. I would not allow Mike's selfish ambitions to rob me of my father's legacy. That house, that cherished space, belonged to me, and I would reclaim it no matter the cost. It was during one of my frequent visits with Paul that the pieces began to fall into place. As we pored over the legal documents surrounding the inheritance, he placed a reassuring hand on my arm. "Gina, this house is yours, and yours alone. No one, not even Mike, can take that away from you." His words resonated deeply, reigniting the spark of defiance that had been smoldering within me. I met his gaze, my jaw set with newfound resolve. "You're right, Paul. It's time to protect what my father entrusted to me, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted." From that moment on, a plan began to take shape. With Paul's guidance and unwavering support, I would navigate the legal intricacies, building an ironclad case to wrest control of the house from Mike's grasp. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, confrontations that would test the very limits of my resilience. But I was ready, fortified by the knowledge that I was fighting for something greater than myself. A sacred bond with the man who had given me life, the man whose values had shaped the core of my being. As I looked ahead to the impending battle, a sense of clarity washed over me. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my self-worth. I would emerge from this crucible stronger, tempered by the fire of my convictions. And when the dust finally settled, I vowed that house would stand as a testament to my father's legacy, a beacon of resilience and unwavering love, shining through the darkness that had once threatened to consume me. In the weeks following my decision to leave Mike, I found solace in the company of an unexpected ally, Paul Hendricks, one of my father's oldest friends. As I settled into the modest apartment he had offered me, Paul's calming presence reminded me so much of Dad. "You know, Gina, your father spoke of you often," Paul said one evening as we sipped tea in his cozy living room. "He was immensely proud of the woman you've become." I felt a lump form in my throat at the mention of Dad. "I just wish he could see me now, Paul. I feel so lost without his guidance." Paul reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on mine. "Ted may be gone, but his spirit lives on in you. And that house he left you? It's a part of his legacy, his final gift." My thoughts turned to the Brooklyn Heights home, now tainted by Mike's selfish renovations. A pang of sadness washed over me, quickly replaced by a simmering anger. "That's just it, Paul. Mike has desecrated everything Dad stood for with that place. He's turned it into a battlefield, all for his own gain." Paul's eyes narrowed, a determined glint flickering behind his glasses. "Then we'll take it back, Gina. That house belongs to you, and no one can take that away." In the days that followed, Paul and I pored over legal documents, meticulously building a case to reclaim my inheritance. With each strategy session, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a fire igniting within me. "Your father trusted you with that home for a reason," Paul reminded me. "It's time to protect what he entrusted to you, to honor his memory in the way he would have wanted." Those words resonated deep within me, echoing the same resilience and strength that Dad had instilled from an early age. I was my father's daughter, imbued with his unwavering spirit. As our plan took shape, I found myself channeling that inner fortitude, drawing strength from the memories of Dad's unwavering love and support. This was about more than just a house. It was a battle to preserve his legacy, to ensure that the values he had imparted would endure. Finally, the day arrived for our first legal maneuver, a formal letter demanding that Mike and his parents vacate the premises immediately. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as Paul and I made our way to the house, each step fueled by a sense of righteous determination. When Mike answered the door, his expression quickly shifted from confusion to outright contempt. "Gina? What is this nonsense?" I steeled myself, meeting his gaze with an unwavering resolve. "This nonsense is me taking back what's rightfully mine. You had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance, Mike. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I won't let you defile it any longer." As the words left my lips, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The shackles of Mike's manipulation, of his parents' toxic influence, began to loosen their grip. Mike's face contorted in anger, but before he could respond, Paul stepped forward, brandishing the legal documents like a sword. "I suggest you heed this notice, Michael. We have taken all necessary steps to ensure Gina's rightful claim to this property. Any further resistance will only compound the consequences you face." In that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was prepared to fight with every ounce of my being. This was about more than just a house. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my self-worth. And with Paul's steadfast support, I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, emboldened by the knowledge that I was honoring my father's most sacred gift. With Paul's steadfast support and guidance, the wheels were set in motion to reclaim what was rightfully mine, my father's cherished home in Brooklyn Heights. Yet, even as our legal strategy took shape, I knew the true battle would be far more personal, a confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating. It was Paul who suggested we arrange a family dinner at the house, a final opportunity to resolve the matter civilly before escalating our efforts. Though apprehensive, I agreed, recognizing that this might be my last chance to appeal to whatever shred of decency still resided within Mike and his parents. The tension was palpable the moment they arrived, their expressions a mix of confusion and thinly veiled contempt. Denise, ever the antagonist, wasted no time in voicing her displeasure. "Just what is the meaning of this, Gina?" she sneered, her eyes narrowing. "We don't have time for your games." I took a deep breath, steadying myself as Paul gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "This is no game, Denise," I stated firmly. "You all had no right to make those decisions about my inheritance. This house is a part of my father's legacy, and I have a plan to honor that in a way he would have wanted." Mike scoffed, his disdain evident. "Your plan? Don't be ridiculous, Gina. This is our future we're talking about." "No, Mike," I countered, my voice unwavering. "This is about preserving what my father entrusted to me, what he wanted to leave behind for generations to come." Denise's face contorted in rage, and for a moment I thought she might explode. "You ungrateful, selfish girl, after everything we've done for you?" I felt Paul tense beside me, but I remained resolute, drawing strength from the memory of my father's unwavering spirit. "What you've done is try to take control, with no regard for Dad's wishes," I stated, meeting Denise's fiery gaze. "Well, it ends now. This house will become what it was always meant to be, a sanctuary, a place of peace and community, just as Dad envisioned." Frank, ever the passive observer, opened his mouth to protest, but I raised my hand, silencing him. "I've already taken the necessary legal steps to assume full ownership of this property. Any further resistance on your part will only lead to consequences none of us want." Mike's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched in barely contained fury. "So, you're just going to throw us out? Your own family?" I matched his stare, unflinching. "If that's what it takes to protect what's rightfully mine, then yes, this is the last time I'll be bullied or manipulated by any of you." An uneasy silence fell over the room, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, it was Denise who broke the tension, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "How dare you? After everything we've sacrificed for this family?" Paul stepped forward, his presence commanding respect. "I'm afraid you've left us no choice. We have the legal documentation to take over the property immediately. I suggest you make arrangements to leave." For a moment, it seemed as though Denise might unleash the full force of her fury, but Frank placed a hand on her arm, silencing her with a weary shake of his head. As they turned to leave, Mike lingered, his gaze filled with a potent mix of resentment and defeat. "You'll regret this, Gina," he spat venomously. "Mark my words." But as I watched them depart, I felt no regret, only a profound sense of relief and vindication. The shackles of their manipulation had finally been severed, and I was free to chart my own course, to honor the legacy my father had bestowed upon me. In the days and weeks that followed, Paul and I worked tirelessly to bring my vision for the house to life. We renovated and refurbished, creating a warm, welcoming space that embodied Dad's generous spirit and love for community. And as the grand opening day arrived, I knew Dad was there in spirit, surrounding me with the same serenity he had always provided. This was more than just a house. It was a living, breathing testament to his values, a sanctuary where his memory would endure for generations to come. The day of the grand opening arrived with a sense of nervous anticipation. As I stood in the newly renovated garden, taking in the vibrant blooms and meticulously landscaped paths, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride and accomplishment. This space, once tainted by Mike's selfish ambitions, had been transformed into a living embodiment of Dad's spirit, a sanctuary of peace and community, just as he would have wanted. The countless hours of hard work, the battles fought and won, had all led to this moment. "You've outdone yourself, Gina." Paul's warm voice broke through my reverie. He moved to stand beside me, his eyes shining with pride. "Your father would be in awe of what you've created here." I felt a lump form in my throat, overwhelmed by the weight of Dad's legacy. "I just hope I've honored his memory in the way he deserved, Paul. This place means everything to me." Paul placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Have no doubt, my dear. You've turned this house into something truly remarkable, a living testament to Ted's generous spirit." As the first guests began to arrive, I felt a surge of nervous energy coursing through me. This was it, the moment I had fought so hard for, the culmination of a journey that had tested the very limits of my resilience. Yet, as I greeted each visitor with a warm smile, I was struck by the overwhelming sense of community and camaraderie that permeated the air. These were Dad's people, the neighbors and friends, who had embraced his kindness and compassion over the years. One by one, they approached me, offering heartfelt congratulations and sharing cherished memories of the man who had touched so many lives. "Your father was a true gem, Gina," Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, said with a misty-eyed smile. "He always had a kind word and a helping hand for anyone in need." Mr. Rodriguez, the local grocer, chimed in with a hearty laugh. "Remember when he organized that neighborhood cleanup day? Ted had us all out there bright and early, picking up trash like a bunch of kids on detention." As the anecdotes flowed, I found myself transported back to the simpler times of my childhood, when Dad's unwavering presence had been the bedrock of my world. Each story, each recollection, was a precious thread woven into the tapestry of his legacy. As the day wore on, the garden became a vibrant hub of activity, filled with the laughter of children and the warm embraces of old friends. I moved among the crowd, basking in the joy and sense of belonging that Dad had always fostered. It was in those moments that I truly understood the profound impact he had made, not just on my life, but on an entire community. This place, this sanctuary, was a living embodiment of his values: generosity, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to bringing people together. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, I found myself standing in a quiet corner, taking in the scene with a sense of profound gratitude. Dad's spirit was alive and thriving here, a testament to the power of one man's unwavering love and compassion. "Dad, I hope you're proud," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "This is for you, a legacy that will endure for generations to come." And in that moment I could have sworn I felt his presence, a gentle breeze caressing my cheek, carrying with it the familiar scent of his cologne. A subtle reminder that he was never truly gone, but lived on in the hearts and lives of those he had touched. As Paul approached, his eyes shining with pride, I knew that my journey had reached its ultimate destination, a place of healing, redemption, and an unbreakable connection to the man who had shaped me into the woman I had become. "You did it, Gina," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "You turned this place into something beautiful, a living embodiment of everything your father stood for." And as I looked around at the joyous scene unfolding before me, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and grace that Dad had instilled in me. For this was his true legacy, a gift that would continue to nurture and inspire long after I was gone.